All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, everybody. So, First Timothy chapter 6, the final chapter of First Timothy. It starts off by saying, "Let all who are under a yoke as bondservants regard their own masters as worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. Those who have believing masters must not be disrespectful on the ground that they are brothers. Rather, they must serve all the better since they..." So it's kind of interesting. There's this thing about they must not be disrespectful on the ground that they are brothers. So basically saying you shouldn't be disrespectful because your masters are brothers, right? On the ground, rather they must serve all the better. So that's what he's saying, right? So some people seem to be, because they as a bond servant became a Christian and then the master also became a Christian, they start to act disrespectfully and saying, "Hey, I don't have to do a good job. I don't need to respect you."
Well, I don't know if they're saying I don't need to respect you, but they're sort of expecting that as a fellow Christian, they'll accept me no matter what.
Yeah, well, actually, the original Greek, I just looked it up, is disrespectful is actually despise.
Oh.
So it's actually a lot stronger. Like you must not like despise your master or like dismiss. And so first of all, the fact that
Why would they do
they
that?
have to actually even say this, Apostle Paul has to say this, means I think it speaks to the amazing power of the gospel to erase boundaries, because to a point where bondservants were doing this to the master, goes, "Hey, you're a brother," and then the master's like, "Yeah, we're brothers." Okay, then so Apostle Paul is saying, but don't do that. Respect them actually more. Work harder, for the reason of, I'm sorry, for the reason of that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. So that's for him. The purpose is above all the purpose of the God's name not being reviled, and that's really opposed to the common. We fight, in our modern day culture, so that our name might not be reviled, right? So anyway, I think applicationally, right?
Yeah, so as we work together as Christians, I guess, instead of despising one another because, hey, we're just brothers or we're just brothers and sisters, here we need to all the more be respectful towards one another, which would seem to make sense, but human nature it's kind of
Familiarity
opposite.
breeds contempt, or maybe sometimes you can kind of think of it this way, like with your worldly bosses, we're a lot more careful. We don't show attitude because you're like, oh, it's like worldly, it's boss, it's my boss, or it's my coworker, or whatever. But then somehow, like, familiarity breeds contempt, kind of thing. We're brothers, right? We're church, so then I don't have to show that kind of care or respect for you. So I think that's some way. I mean, for some people, I think I think in our church, plenty of people actually do give respect to the leaders, and I think from some outsider's perspective, that seems weird, or like, whoa, what's going on there? And I think that kind of speaks to the fact that they expect the church relationships to be not respectful that way. Yeah, I guess, right? I don't know. Teach and urge
these things.
Yeah.
So we need to be taught and we need to be urged, even though it might be the same things that we're urging is kind of
It's stronger
telling
than
them-
teaching.
Yeah, and sort of it's sort of more like things you already know, but you need to be urged to do it.
Yeah.
So
Urge, I looked it up on the Webster dictionary, Merriam-Webster. It says to demand earnestly, to provoke to action, to force or impel toward a direction. And it's like, yeah, you urge, right? And what are these things that Apostle Paul is saying we gotta urge the church members to do? It turns out, like, it's first of all, there is doctrine. There's a doctrine of sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ, but also and the teaching that accords with godliness. In other words, what he's urging them to do is not simply like you got to urge the gospel. There's also the teachings about godliness, about godly behavior, including stuff that he's been talking about this entire time. So, all right.
So those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, a snare, many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And when I think it can sound sort of extreme, and somebody can say like, but what's wrong with just wanting to have enough money to be comfortable? Does that mean that I'm going to then be plunged into ruin and destruction? I see plenty of people who live with a lot of money and they're not plunging themselves into ruin and destruction. So is he exaggerating here or what?
Well, for those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I think that's generally true. I guess we can always look for exceptions this way, but isn't this? I guess maybe you can look at it this way: like as we stand before the throne of God, after we die. I don't know. How would we then evaluate our desire to be rich? It would seem foolish at best, and maybe ruinous at worst. You know,
so I mean, I think we do see plenty of people who desire to be rich and make that the goal and object of their life, and they do plunge themselves into ruin and destruction.
And
a lot of senseless and
harmful
harmful desires. And the next verse, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And just like Jesus says, you cannot serve both God and money. So there is something about money, though money itself seems to be just a neutral thing. It draws our hearts, and it's that one thing in direct competition with God. So in that way, I think like when we make that our main desire, we do get plunged into ruin and destruction. And at best, like it says in verse 10, we wander away from the faith and pierce ourselves with many pangs. So wandering away, it's not like this person is going, oh, I love money, so I'm not gonna serve God. But as that money grips our hearts, the gospel becomes something that we need to distance ourselves from, and that we can't.
God becomes threatening when you love money. I mean, that's what you will love one and despise the other, right? You will serve one and hate the other, right? So how does that happen? Well, God becomes threatening as your craving starts to grow, and my craving for money doesn't get satisfied. So boy,
and you cannot live a life of pursuing money and pursuing godliness like the rest of the chapter describes. It describes a very intense pursuit after godliness, and if you're pursuing money, you cannot do that at the same time. So I think, and pierce themselves with many pangs. I thought about how living a life of selfish pursuit of money is bound to fill you with a lot of regrets and a lot of pangs, like as you look back on your life, instead of pursuing this thing that I can't even take with me, I should have used that opportunity to do so many other things that would have been more lasting and eternal. And so the many pangs, I can imagine that. And even for myself, like the regrets I have, like how much more if I had made money the pursuit of my life. So I think the love of money is very subtle. It can be like it kind of creeps in, and so we have to constantly be watching out for that.
So in our region, I think love of money more than love of sensuality, more like that's sort of the LA area or New. But here, love of money, love of success, I think is the king. And so we have to really flee. In verse 11, I didn't actually include that. In verse 11, it says flee from these things and pursue other things. So I think that's what we got to do. All right, that's it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.